Telephone.
It's over there where I can't see it. Thank you to Joe and Claire for inviting me here tonight. As Joe said, I was here once before, and that I remember that call was a last-minute call. It was supposed to be a series of doctors up here speaking, and they called and said, "Could you come up and talk?" And I said, "What are we going to be talking about?" And he told me that there were some doctors here. So I came up and said I'm not a doctor, so I spoke about something totally different. So this time at least, Joe was at, as a matter of fact, I see a lot of faces here of people who were at the West Bergen Tea Party meeting in July. And Joe was there and heard this presentation and asked me to do it here. So for those people who were there, I'm sorry, but you're going to hear the same thing. So if I make a mistake, you help me out on it, okay? Two things I'd like to ask before we start. One is that you hold questions and comments until the end so that Joe can keep this on schedule, otherwise we could be here all night. And the second, if you would all please take your phones out of your pocket right now and turn them on to vibrate or turn them off to silence. Because if they go off, I lose my place and I go back and start at the beginning, and again we'll be here all evening. Now, as I was saying, I wrote an article this past Independence Day, and it generated quite a bit of interest and comments, and I was asked to expound on what I meant and what I was thinking when I wrote it. And so Joel and Susan invited me over to West Bergen a couple of months ago, and I told them what I was thinking, and that's what we're going to do tonight. So let's begin with the article as it was written, and then I'll go into what my thoughts were and what I think it means. That whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it, and to institute new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. My friends, our government in its current composition has failed us. Congress has allowed legislation to be put into place, leaving decisions which impact the very foundation of our republic to bureaucrats who are unanswerable to the American people. The executive branch has overstepped its constitutional authority, ruling by fiat and imposing a soft tyranny on the citizens. The judiciary, the last recourse in our systems of checks and balances, has forsaken its role to uphold the Constitution. We've just witnessed a rash of decisions that defy comprehension. And while the recent decisions render the Constitution meaningless, what's most telling are the words of Chief Justice Roberts after his earlier vote a few years ago to uphold Obamacare. After rendering his tortuous legalistic contortions to uphold the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act, Chief Justice Roberts admonished the American people, and I quote, "Members of this court are vested with the authority to interpret the law. We possess neither the expertise nor the prerogative to make policy judgments. Those decisions are entrusted to our nation's elected leaders who can be thrown out of office if the people disagree with them. It is not our job to protect the people from the consequences of their political choices." End quote. And so here we stand, the last line of defense, the last possible hope for the restoration of our republic to the founders' intent. We the people, and especially those of us who are part of this Tea Party movement, we must take a stand. Like those Spartans on Thermopylae, we must be willing to sacrifice all for this great cause. The odds, my friend, look daunting, but if we remember who we are as Americans, and if we come together, we can make this right. We still can do it, but it depends on each one of us. You see, America is a very special place. We swear no allegiance to a king. We have no royalty. Our nation was founded on an idea that we are all created equal, and that we have certain inalienable rights which are endowed to us by our Creator, not by our government. We believe that governments derive their just power from the consent of the governed, and that's you and me. Those of us who believe in the founding principles, who understand that divine providence had a hand in the foundation of this country, realize that there is something ingrained in the American spirit, some inherent yearning for liberty, some desire to just be left alone to make our own fortune, to seek our own happiness, coupled with a unique belief in charity, in extending a helping hand to those who are truly in need. You see, that spirit, that very essence of being American, that can never be taken from you. Politicians may squander our treasure, leaving us bankrupt. They may decimate our economy, leaving us jobless. They may confiscate our wealth through burdensome taxation, and they may try to regulate every aspect of our lives in a veiled attempt to enslave us. But they can never forcibly take away our American spirit. The only way that we can lose this God-given blessing is to surrender it, turn our backs on it, to trade it in, if you will, for some empty promise of government largesse. See, unfortunately, countless Americans, weaned on generation after generation of government handouts, perpetuated by the progressive liberal ideology, have indeed surrendered their spirit. They've accepted a new way of life, dependent on a bureaucratic leviathan for their every need. No longer the makers of their own dreams, no longer the guardians of their children's inheritance. And as more and more of these weakened Americans accept the yoke of enslavement in return for their vote, the more powerful the bureaucracy becomes, the more insatiable the appetite of the beast. So we must remain vigilant, lest we too succumb to the siren song of the nanny state. So I repeat to you, that spirit, that very essence of being American, can never be taken from you. It's yours to hold forever. It can only be lost if you willingly surrender it. So cherish it, nurture it, draw strength from it, and pass it on to your children. It's the only way they're going to get it. Keep that flame burning, because if we all do this one little thing, then come election day, there'll be a firestorm blazing across this nation, purging us of the charlatans and the corruption. And out of this cauldron, using the very molds given to us by our founders, we can reforge this nation to its rightful form and once again restore honor to America. But each of you must keep your own spirit alive. You've got to keep those embers burning. So enjoy Independence Day. Remember what it means. Remember who we are. And remember what is ultimately at stake. The future is now in our hands. And I guess that's exactly where the founders would want it to be when we get to a state like this. Do everything you can to assure that this Independence Day will not be our last. In every stage of these oppressions, we have petitioned for redress in the most humble terms. Our repeated petitions have been answered only by repeated injury. A prince whose character is thus marked by every act which may define a tyrant is unfit to be the ruler of a free people. Those words from the unanimous Declaration of the 13 United States of America. Okay, that's the article. What does it mean? How do we react? How do we overcome the sense of betrayal? The feeling that the obstacles we face are insurmountable? Where do we turn for help? How do we fight the depression and the sense of failure? Now, if you've been feeling depressed, let me assure you, you're not alone. Let me start by confessing that I've been on the verge of completely giving up numerous times over the last couple of years. I've stopped holding meetings of our groups. I've turned inward. I focus now on my family. I've not been actively engaged in this fight for nearly a year outside of my writing and my speaking. But I know we have a problem. And we cannot rely on organizations that profess to fight for our cause yet spend more time fundraising than helping us. And we know we can't rely on our representatives. And we also cannot rely on our religious leaders. The greatest realization I had regarding the sense of helplessness is that while I understood what a hard fight we had against liberalism, I always believed that all we had to do was rally behind the Republican Party, the party that professed to be the champion of conservative American values, and they would take the fight to the left. It is the utter failure of the Republican Party, the backstabbing betrayal of their base, that plunged me into giving up and embracing despair and the inevitable fall of our nation as we knew it. Now, as Joe said before, let me recognize we do have some wonderful statesmen in the party. I mean, here you have Scott Garrett, God bless him. Elsewhere, you've got men like Louis Gohmert, Jim Jordan, Mike Lee, Jim Burdenstein, Ted Cruz, and others who honestly represent the people and are fighting for our cause. But they've been marginalized, punished, demoted, and had their seats threatened by the leadership of Boehner, McConnell, and the rest of the spineless politicians who place an R next to their names. I think some of you may disagree with me, but believe me, the Republican Party is not going to be our savior, at least not in its current stage. How many of you have seen the documentary, Agenda, Grinding America Down? Quite a few of you. Those of you who have, and by the way, if you haven't, see it. It will open your eyes to what's going on around you. And those of you who have, you understand the long-range plan of the Communist Party to destroy the America we know from within like a cancer. Infiltrate our schools and our churches, corrupt our culture, promote immorality, dependence, class envy, and division in any way possible. Take a look around. Have they been successful? Look how far our culture has devolved. Look at the state of our education system. Look at the liberalism that runs rampant in our colleges and in our churches and synagogues. A vocal, active left, encouraged by an anti-American president, unchecked by a worthless Congress, and allowed to run wild by the courts, has jumped on issue after issue to promote their agenda and to grind America down. Let's look at it. Every police action now is turned into an opportunity for race wars. Some two-bit racist bastard walks into a church in South Carolina and kills people who are gathered in prayer, and because he had a picture of the Confederate flag, an entire segment of our history and our culture is declared offensive and purged from our existence. Republican presidential nominee Donald Trump decides to forgo political correctness and say the things many Americans have on their minds, and he becomes targeted for destruction, not just by the left and the lapdog media, but also by the Republican establishment, who now see him in the same way they see the Tea Party that brought them into power, as an embarrassment to their brand, a brand that now is nothing more than a rubber stamp for the president, his minions, big business, the Chamber of Commerce, and which couldn't give a damn about their constituents, who are the people who actually make this country great. Look at our country. Economically, we're hurting with countless millions out of work. Millions on food stamps. Generation after generation living off the public dole. And with no sense of history, no self-respect, and no desire to contribute to the common good. Our open borders diminish our sovereignty, increase the strain on our economy, and leave us open to potential terrorist attacks. Our military is being depleted, and their spirit is being crushed by social experimentation, micromanagement, and obscene rules of engagement, leaving our brave men and women out there to be killed rather than to respond as they've been taught. Globally, our once great beacon of light has been reduced to a barely discernible glow, ridiculed on the world stage. Our culture has been decimated. Religion is slowly but surely being removed from the public domain. We watch atrocities being committed by barbarians, and we just turn a blind eye to them. In the light of all these issues we face, what do our representatives focus on? Increasing military strength, real job creation,
Yeah, exactly.
reduction of taxes and regulations, encouragement of private enterprise, strengthening the family as the building block of society, regaining global superiority and influence and thereby securing our safety at home, securing our sovereign borders to protect our citizens. Is that what they do? No. They rant and rave about how offensive the name the Washington Redskins is. They swear to remove the Confederate flag from the public eye. They condemn people of faith for not openly embracing and participating in same-sex marriage ceremonies. They promote unbridled, illegal immigration and threaten anyone who would dare to stand in their way. And they engage in shameless, divisive practices to curry favor with voters. This, my friends, is not the future the founders had envisioned. Let's get back to that opening essay. It starts and it ends with words from the Declaration of Independence. Words from a people who had grown weary of the oppression of a tyrant, who had tried petitions, reason, and gentlemanly arguments, and who had finally resolved themselves to be rid of the burdens of an oppressive government. You see, in case you haven't noticed, we today find ourselves in similar straits. We have petitioned, we have argued, we have protested. We have beseeched our duly elected representatives for intervention and relief, and our petitions have resulted in repeated injury. The Obama administration, emboldened by the refusal of the opposition party to hold them accountable, has doubled down on their earlier transgressions against our freedoms. Where is the outcry against so blatant an attack against our basic freedoms? Where are the voices of our so-called representatives in Congress? You see, we've reached a time and a place unthinkable only a few short years ago. I suggest, if the Republican Party were a true opposition party, it would be our refuge and our fallback in dire times like this. But that is not the case. The Republican establishment has shown its true colors. They are content with their position as the second-class ruling party, and they will fight harder against any attempts by conservatives to challenge them than they will against their so-called opponents in the Democrat Party. And where are the protests and the raised voices of the citizens who sit and watch reality TV while their children's future is being stolen, and the culture which their fathers and grandfathers died for erodes under moral decay? And where are our religious leaders? Yeah, there's been some mumbling opposition from the church. It's far too intermittent and far too lukewarm in its tenor. You see, when the church is more concerned about being politically correct, too wrapped up in the term social justice, which when sold by the left is merely income redistribution and the wholesale subjugation of entire groups of citizens to dependence on the state for its magnificent largesse, and they're too afraid of losing their congregants for preaching the word of God, then where is the moral high ground? You see, I found a phrase many years ago that I've adopted as my mantra. It's taken from Virgil's Aeneid. The Latin is audentes fortuna juvat. Fortune favors the bold. Audentes fortuna juvat. You know, we've been taught that the meek shall inherit the earth. But I suggest to you it is the bold who will determine exactly what that inheritance will look like. So if you care about the future of your children and your grandchildren, you cannot sit meekly on the sidelines lamenting the deterioration of our society. It's time that you all understand that only you can change the direction of this republic. only you can shape the future that we leave for our children. So what do? How do we stop the slide? How do we reverse direction? How bold can we actually be? Let's talk a little bit about what we can do. First, simple. Continue to put the pressure on your representatives. Write, call, email, show up at their office, protest, make noise, learn from the left. They never, ever, ever, ever give up, and they never take no for an answer. They become a thorn in the side until they get their way. But until that outcry that we give to our representatives becomes deafening, don't expect much more than the same old BS. They'll speak the right words. They'll tell you what you want to hear, but they will not deliver on the actions. They'll take the meaningless votes that don't mean anything, so they say they did something, and when the time comes when they can make a difference, they capitulate and fold up and disregard what the people of this country really want. I also suggest you look into a program being offered by the Citizens of Self-Government. It teaches you how to have effective communication with your representatives if you have the ability, the gumption, the desire to have that conversation with them. I just can't bring myself to that point. But it's a new approach, and I'm told by the people who are doing it that it's actually working. So take advantage of it. I think there's some people here who have already become involved in it. Second, visit your priests, your ministers, and rabbis. Let them know your concerns. Why aren't they speaking out against these blatant attacks on people of faith, as Joe was talking about earlier? Why aren't they preaching the Word of God as it relates to the politics of our nation? There's a separation of church and state, but there's things that can be said. Are they afraid of losing liberal parishioners? Losing donations? Don't they understand that they're in a position to speak about the need for a moral society which is absolutely necessary for our constitutional system to work? It does not work in an immoral society. Make it crystal clear when you see them that you're offended by their lack of moral leadership. Let them know they will lose you and your contributions. Better yet, organize like-minded individuals and have them accompany you. Ask for a group meeting and discuss the role of the church and the priests and the rabbis and the ministers in this fight. Remind them about the role of the Black Robe Regiment that was so instrumental during the American Revolution. And if you don't know about it, look it up. Read it. The preachers played a big part in mobilizing the people during the Revolution. And if they speak about losing their tax exemption, ask them if they think that will be sufficient justification for not preaching God's work when they stand before Him on Judgment Day. And I share a story. I've been having conversations with a priest who first was going to allow me to speak about religious rights to his congregation, and then got cold feet and said, no, you can't. And he said, Nick, you know, it's nice. You get to say anything you want. You don't care. You're not accountable to anybody. But I've got to worry about my tax system here. I can't lose my tax exemption. Thank you. And I said, Father, let me ask you a question. We leave here, you and I, and we walk out in the street and we get hit by a bus. And the next minute, we're standing in front of our Creator. And He looks at us and He goes, Nick, you know what? Your rhetoric was really kind of high. You really pushed it. I'm comfortable saying, but I said what I had to say. Somebody had to say it. I says, Father, are you comfortable looking your Creator in the eye and going, I had to worry about my tax exemption? We turned and walked away. And things just have to be done, and things have to be said. Third, and here's the simple yet difficult thing that can make it right for all of you. Lead your lives, your individual lives, based on what you know is right. When the government, whether it be federal, state, or local, comes up with some new, burdensome, freedom-robbing regulation, just say no. I mean, don't allow them to strip away your liberty. They can't lock us all up. And if they do, well, then the country's damned, and we're not going to have to worry about it. Don't allow them to tell you what you can and cannot say. Stand up for the America that we love. Condemn political correctness whenever and wherever you come across it. It is a cancer that is destroying this country. Americans do not let the words or actions of others offend them. That's not what Americans are. Would this country have ever achieved the greatness that we've witnessed if we were a pathetic people who shuddered and took offense at everything we heard and we saw? I think not. Explain that we, you and I, are offended by the fecklessness that we see around us. We're not a country that relishes victimhood. We thrive on overcoming hardships and succeeding. We respect success and strive to imitate the successful. We don't envy them and hope that they fail. We're the land of opportunity and prosperity. Remember that. And when somebody says like you shouldn't say it, tell them where they could go, because we are, and we're a great and a proud country. America is strongest when we all succeed, not when we all moan and groan about unfairness. We believe in equality of opportunity for all, not equality of outcome. We all get out of it what we put into it. We're a merit-rewarding society that rewards the achiever and lifts up the truly downtrodden, but we do not become great by encouraging dependence and irresponsibility. Live your lives by that mantra. That's who we are. That's what made this country great. Lastly, take back your schools. You know, I don't want to make this an argument about religion, but Joe's absolutely right. We're losing our religious rights, and it's so much part of our First Amendment rights that it's representative of what we're discussing tonight. You know, I think back, it was around 2 years ago, there was a party hosted by Joe and Claire and Joel and Susan and some of the other leaders here in Bergen County. And I remember Joe coming up to me while I'm eating dinner and saying, "Will you come up and say a few words?" Now, I had not prepared anything. I mean, he didn't give me any warning other than finish what you're eating and get up and talk. So I just got up and spoke from the heart. And I want to share what I said that evening because I think it's even more relevant today than it was 2 years ago. And it goes directly to some of the things you were just saying, Joe, up here. So it ties in very, very nicely. And think about it. When did we decide that it was okay for other people to decide where, when, and how our children could practice their faith? When did we relinquish our rights and our obligations as parents? How is it that we could allow little Susie to be told by her teacher that her essay is unacceptable because she mentions God? When did it become okay for someone to tell Tommy and his friends that they could not kneel and pray on the football field? And why would we allow John or Mary to be told that they could not reference their faith at an assembly because it might offend some student? You see, we wring our hands and we talk about how terrible it is. But you know what? That doesn't cut it. Our failure to respond only encourages those who see religion as an obstacle to the establishment of their secular agenda to replace God with government. I suggest to you another tact. Why don't we go with Susie to her teacher and confront him or her on their intolerance? And when that doesn't work, demand to see the principal and then the superintendent. And when you still have no satisfaction, here's where the fun starts. Gather your like-minded friends and family and go to the homes of the school board members and protest. Bring signs, notify the press. Accuse them of being the intolerant bigots and fascists that they are. Let them see how it feels. Put the pressure on them. You control the narrative. Call it what it is and watch them squirm for a change. Be a lot of fun on top of trying to prove a point. And stand with your children on the football field and stand with them on the podium. Demonstrate, demand, never accept no for an answer. Let them pull you and your children off the field. Let them arrest you and take you from the podium. And let this happen all across the country. Now you tell me, what will be the reaction across the nation? And I'm not talking about in New York or Washington and San Francisco. I'm talking about flyover country. I'm talking about throughout the great fruited plains of this country. Are those people going to see what happened, see it on TV and say, you know what, they got what they deserve? Or are their voices going to cry out and say, damn it, it's about time we stood up for our children and for our faith? You will embolden others to follow you. And you'll teach your children a valuable lesson. There are things that you must stand up for. There are things worth fighting for. And there are things where you go against authority if authority is wrong, because right is right. Now, friends, don't wait for the Republican Party to right this ship. They have enough problems writing their own right now. Don't look for donation-hungry organizations to make things right. I mean, there are a few of them out there that are truly interested in helping the country, but check them out before you just send money to people. And unfortunately, with very few exceptions, don't look for our religious leaders to take a stand here or to take the lead. We the people means we the people. This is our country. This is our government. This is our birthright and the inheritance we leave to our children and our grandchildren. So one by one, you and you and you and you and you. Just do your part. Don't make it any more complicated than that. Remember, you are Americans. You are a free and prosperous people. Many have given their lives to guarantee us our freedoms. And it's our turn to do just a small part, but to do it together. So as I close, let me offer you this challenge. Go home tonight. Look at your children, or look at pictures of your children and your grandchildren. Then find the mirror. Stand in front of the mirror. Look into your eyes, into your heart, into your soul, and swear to yourselves the words of Thomas Paine. If there be trouble, let it be in my day, that my children shall live in peace. Thank you. May God continue to bless this wonderful country.